right. So we have a couple more minutes. People start filing in, so we'll give it a couple more minutes and we'll get started. So in order not to take time away from the artists, I'll introduce myself. My name is Lenny Campello. I'm the curator of this exhibit. And the 19 others that are around the DMV. We're up to almost 700 women artists surveyed, and still unable to make it stop. Which is a good thing, I guess. But first and foremost, I want to welcome all of you to the American Museum of the Katzen Art Center. I learned to say that instead of Katzen Museum. It's not the Katzen Museum.
American University Museum.
I just finished saying that, Zach. I was educating them. So, first and foremost, thank you to the Alper Foundation and the Alper Initiative for the Arts. If you're an artist and you don't know what that is, you should learn and take advantage of it. I don't want to consume the time that we have for the artists. I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves, and I'm going to sort of just throw out a general question. We have about an hour to manage your time. I'm of Cuban ancestry, so I don't know how to do that. But I hope that we can allow everyone. So at the end of the discussion, we have time for questions. I'm having a flashback to college, so nobody ever wants to sit in the first row. So there we go. To the straight A students. Yes. The Navy made me, I don't know why I'm meandering about this, but when I went to college, the Navy made me study math because I was going to be an anthropologist. And of course, I hate math. And we used to audit the classes. If the first 2 or 3 rows were always full, we never take that class because we knew that those were real math students, and the curve would be up here. In any event, so this was the initial key show of the 19 others that are spread throughout the DMV. A term which, according to the Washington City paper, apparently I invented. Yes, I take credit for it. And I so far have journeyed into the show, curated about 700 women out of over 4,000 potential entries. Most of you have been to other openings. I already heard this joke. The funniest part was all the entries that were not qualifiers, including the 46 entries from about 40 different states where women artists that work at their Department of Motor Vehicles. I am honored to be in the presence of these super women artists. Also, I see a lot of artists in the audience as well that are participants in this show and others. And the one thing that I want to keep repeating is that this exhibition and all the others is not women's artwork. This exhibition and all of them is about art by women, period. Because I don't think there's such thing as women's artwork by women. So remember that. Jenny, I'm going to start with you because you're all the way up there. Can you tell us a little bit about your work, as well as a bit about yourself and about the work, or anything else that you want to talk to? And I'll play the time arbiter sometime.
Can you hear me okay? Thanks for being here. I think it's such a generous thing to have your speech. People speak about their my piece is a Go Girls jumping on the bed. That is right back that way in blue and gold.
Can you say your full name?
Yes, it's Jenny Kanzler. And I am primarily a painter. I work in oil. I grew up in the area, moved away, lived in Philadelphia for a decade, have been back more than a decade, and I can tell you that my work is often described as bizarre, weird, odd, disturbing, dark.
Why are you quoting me?
And I consider myself primarily a storyteller, and I am interested in the subject of the uncanny and kind of hovering in that in-between space of not being sure what is and what isn't, and of fear and wonder. I don't want to take up too much time. This piece in particular, it's probably one of my more lighthearted pieces. It's about, in my mind, the sense of, boredom that leads to exploration, a little bit of maybe getting in trouble. That the picture depicts girls turned into goats. One's eating a cake at the foot of the bed, one's hiding under the bed making a secret phone call, and the other one's jumping on top of the bed. There's a little bit of ambiguity about whether this is a time lapse, if it's one character that's gone through a sequence, or if there are actually three characters in the room. And I was really fascinated by the idea of, you see like Pan and Bacchanalia and, all these representations of human male goat creatures. And I was really interested in the idea of having a female goat creature that is, domesticated but connected to the wild. So I was playing with that idea.
In between the artists, I'm going to add a few things here and there. When I selected and invited these specific artists to talk, I wanted to have a mixture. I literally have 2 or 3 artists in here that I met in doing this show. I came across Jenny's work, Artomatic. So another success story from that wonderful, amazing, crazy event. Again, if you're an artist and you do not know what Artomatic is, you should and pay attention to it. Akemi Maegawa, we're just reminiscing about this. I actually met Akemi about the same time I met my wife, but she used to live right next door to her, way back in A Glitch in the Matrix. No longer, but so I kind of met both of them almost at the same time. And so I've known Akemi as long as I've known my wife, which is now going on in a few decades. Akemi?
Hi, my name is Akemi Maegawa. I'm originally from Japan. I was born and raised and worked and moved to here to study and change the career. So I started to study fine art being adult. So, and I met Lenny while I was still studying at the program. So I'm much older than my peer, classmates, but I'm pretty happy that I am here and I survived because my previous work was just killing me. So, anyway, because of my background, all the works were based on cultural difference, some shots, American culture and Japanese cultures, all those differences. And my works a lot relate to Japanese historical things, to habits, and all sorts of things that are different from US. So when I look back, there are so many things were made pretty literal, but with humor, because I needed to have a humor to survive and communicate because my English was not first language, so I had to somehow use the same kind of language, that universal language. I think humor seems to work same as the visual language. So I used a lot of simple methods. At the same time, humor in the work a lot. This I don't have my work here. My work is in the vitrine on the hallway. That piece is made from ceramics and fabric, and I use a lot of work, to make ceramics, and then sometimes combine with fabric, which is a very unusual combination. But it turned out to be for me, it makes sense at this point because I got more comfortable with not so super direct, but nuanced current stage of my life. And though that piece is a little bigger, but it's part of my series, so-called small sculpture series. It's like a handheld size. When you look at my piece, the small sculpture series, it looks like a Japanese sweet, but it's very whimsical. You want to eat it. So that's the strange combination. I think that I thought it was so good with totally different material, and then also culture. The character is so different from solid, everlasting ceramics and very simple, domestic, almost polyester or the synthetic fabric that is not treated as a luxurious material, but if you treat well and then put together, it can make a magic. So for me, right at this moment, my position is kind of my sculpture. So when you don't see my work, go and see on the hallway, and then on Instagram, you can see my work too.
I think personally, when you go see that piece by Akemi, I've taken quite a few tours to this show, and they're always shocked and surprised and amused and entertained by the fact that they're told they're not aware that it's fabric. So it's almost like in the ceramic sense of the word, you've invented like a trompe l'oeil, it fools their eye, and then they're astounded what that piece has achieved by the use of the fabric. So please take the time, if you haven't seen it yet, to walk around. There is an image of it right there. Thank you, Akemi. Another lady who I know, although I haven't, until this show came, I probably hadn't seen you in 20 plus years.
We both have gray hair now.
Yes. Her work, Sophia McCrocklin's work, is the amazing, also in a sense, fool your eye. Giant leaf in the background, all completely fabricated. I'll let her explain it in more detail if she wants to when she talks about her work. But I am always astounded when an artist can take something that generally in nature is small or whatever and be able to giganticize it and in a sense make it majestic and still retain that sense of the original piece, which I think a lot of people don't understand or realize how difficult that is once you change the scale.
Hi, thank you. It's a real honor to be here today. Let's see. I guess probably the most important thing you need to know about me is that when I was 8 years old, I went to a strip mine. I grew up in Kentucky. We went out to the strip mine, and I couldn't find the mountain. And I guess that was part of the purpose of the trip. Ever since then, I have been deeply motivated in my love for our planet. And I also had, since I was a very young child, an urge to create and to make things. I learned how to sew at a very young age. My mother taught me how to sew, and for years I made all my better clothing. In college and in high school, I studied art, I studied weaving, but I did not major in art. My parents were adamant that I go to a graduate school program that would I would be a doctor or a lawyer. And I ended up going to law school and practicing environmental law, and worked at EPA for several years, drafting legislation. But at the same time, also doing my art, sometimes full-time, sometimes part-time. And eventually, I was fortunate to have my first solo show when I was about 40. And I was just so delighted at the response. In time, I partnered with various parks. I really wanted to communicate the beauty and the frailty of nature. And in that capacity, I was the first artist in residence at Dunbar Noakes Park, documenting all their ferns. And later, after that, I partnered with Rock Creek Conservancy, and The Leaf Behind You is part of that last effort in a show called Faces of the Forest. So I'm continuing with my partnership with Rock Creek Park. The piece behind you is sewn first. So I paint on this dacron, which it's behind that I've reinforced it, stitched in copper wire to sort of keep it in sort of a more structural sense than it would otherwise. And then I often go to the herbarium at the Natural History Museum, look at other leaves, look at these under microscopes, and recreate what the leaf looks like. And anyway, so that's my story in a nutshell. And again, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Lenny.
There will be more questions later. Amber Robles-Gordon is also a name that is familiar to a lot of people that know anything or everything about the art scene here in the Washington area. I often, when talking to the press, describe my sort of tried and true formula for assembling group shows over the decades that I've been doing that. And I try to do it in what I call a pyramid, where at the top of the pyramid, I try to have the well-known, what the art world calls blue chip artists of an area. In the middle, the large number of artists that are exhibited widely in the area, and at the bottom, and kind of almost the most important part, is that's the base of the pyramid, which in the group showcases are artists that are new to me, or young artists. By young, I'm not talking about age, I'm talking about how long they've been doing artwork. In some cases, there's people in this show that graduated from MFA or even art school recently. And there's people that are in their 80s who are just started painting 2-3 years ago, right? Both of those are young artists. I'm going to embarrass Amber a little by saying that I would describe her as one of the blue chip artists in our area. Well established, but not by luck, but a lot of hard work, which is usually what it takes to arrive at her status. Now that I've thoroughly embarrassed you.
Thank you, Lenny. So my name is Sandra Robles-Gordon. I am of Afro-Puerto Rican heritage, grew up in Arlington, Virginia, went to Howard. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Howard University for my graduate degree. My undergraduate degree is from Trinity College, which was in business. I basically decided early on that I was going to get a business degree to be able to manage myself as an artist, and then going to get my my master's from Howard University, which was hilarious because to some extent the chair at the time, Al Smith, basically said to me, Amber, you know that people do this the opposite way, right? They get their undergraduate degree in art, and then they go and get their master's in art. I was like, well, that wasn't part of my plan. But luckily, my collages got me through and into Howard, and graduated in 2011, and then I've been, professional artist since. I'm very grateful to have people like Lenny that call me up and say, hey, we want to have you in a show. So the work, I do large scale installations, textile, sculptural, and I do small works, but I'm definitely what I would consider known for larger installations of public art and textile sculptures. But in this series, shown in this exhibition, I have a series called Temples of My Familiars, Deserving, Anointed and Deserving. And one of my primary aesthetic languages is through collage and assemblage. And I just did a talk the day before yesterday, and I just remember being animated because I love to create, period. It's about creation for me. So it's not that I stay in a particular formula in terms of production. I look for what is going to convey and express what I need it to express. And then I pull from those and then I create with that, if that makes sense. Methods and material. Materiality means everything to me, if that's such a thing. But in this particular series, I was preparing for, in DC I work with More Fine Arts, and we were preparing for a show in Miami, I think maybe 2017, 2018. And she was like, this is Amy, this is she I'm referring to, which is the director of More Fine Arts. And she was like, okay, Amber, I need work, and I'm like, okay. And I had been doing a certain amount of cleaning, organizing. So it was most likely around September, October. And I remember thinking, okay, what am I gonna do? And I remember thinking about the parts, these slivers of works that I didn't complete, works where something didn't make it into the final works where I was drawing, some of my renderings that I do for some of the larger sculptural public artworks. And I remember organizing them and thinking, these pieces, they're all pieces, but they're in conversation with each other. And I thought, okay, this is the time. This is when all these things that have been like slivers are pulling on me and saying, make us speak, make us be in conversation. And so that's what I did for this body of work. The Temples of My Familiar, that if you know, is a Alice Walker book. And I literally borrowed her title. And so each work has one of my renderings of fabric sculptural work. And so what I did was I inverted them. And I made them the temples of these conversations that I was having with these other art elements. It's one of my favorite series. Sometimes I think I'm a very emotional person. And my love of art and my love of humanity, they fight each other, if that makes any sense. If you put me in my ideal situation in terms of funding and my family and just Amber create, I don't know that I would attempt at figuration or even bother with figuration or conceptual works around specific themes, if that makes sense. I think I would just go abstract fucking crazy. And I would be happy, right? But my love for humanity wins out. And so then I create works that are about humanity and our flaws, our complexities. But this series, I didn't have to mess with humanity in that way. I was just able and allowed to create through abstraction. So, thank you.
As I noted, we put in the show together. I wanted to have young artists that were new to me. We already, Jenny already talked a little bit more, way too short, coming back to you. The very first piece that I selected for this show, by the way, when I first got started, initially there were going to be 100 artists, by the way. You know, I said we're up to almost we're past 700 as of this morning. But initially what I did is I sort of farmed it out. I went to about 15 or 20 collectors, gallery owners, curators, and said, hey, send me 10 artists that you would recommend be in this show. So I sort of crowdsourced the start of it. After that, it was an avalanche. I didn't need to crowdsource anything. And several names kept popping out in multiple lists. A few of them, quite a few of them, I had never heard of because they were, again, to me, new artists. Selena Jackson was one that kept popping up in the list of some well-known collectors and curators here in the area. Her work, right behind us, was the very first piece that I selected for the exhibition because it really struck me. One of my nerd habits is I love history and I love all kinds of things all kinds of narrative work that work really, really good at presenting an idea, a narrative, something associated with the past or even the future. Using art in a way that it kind of gives you a punch to the solar plexus of the mind before you realize what it has done. I've embarrassed her already many times by saying that I consider her to be a prodigy. In that sense, to me anyway. And but I think that she can take it. So.
Hi, my name is Selena Jackson. Born and raised in DC. So it's really great to be in a space working with other artists in the DMV, other women artists. I would say my art career is still pretty new. I would say after my community college days at Montgomery College, where I studied studio arts, I got my first studio in Tacoma Park at the DC Art Center for a while, and then it was during the pandemic where this was kind of manifesting. Actually, I kind of uprooted myself suddenly and moved to Rochester for about a year. But within 3 months of me being there, the pandemic hit. And I was like, I'm alone, I have no friends here, just me in this apartment and my paintings. That's all I got. And so I was just reading. And I remember Musée d'Orsay at the time, they were doing a very large collection called Moderator. And I was like, I have to get my hands on that book. And I obsessively translated it from French to English just to read it, and that's where like the beginning of like wanting to research my work really kicked off. Like I was making paintings like I love the paintings I was making in my earlier time when I was in school because I loved portraiture, I loved figurative works, I loved anatomy, like those I love the foundations. But when it came to composing something that was like a narrative for me, that was where sitting down and having nothing but a library of books and some empty canvases, that's really where it took off for me. So while I was reading Manga Noir, this diagram kept popping up, and something about that popped up for me pretty frequently too. Just because I'm just into a lot of science and anatomy and biology books, so every once in a while you'll come across like some anthropological studies or photographic studies of just different interactions, but I never understood why they were there. And it's kind of like it all kind of connected. Where my time of hanging out at the Holocaust Museum, just because I was so interested in like those tools that they had to measure hair color, eye color, genealogy, and it was like on a road trip where I was with the next partner, I was reading another book that was also, I was very, very much like looking for people who looked like me in art. And I think that's where a lot of this came from. I was looking for a lot of me in art that didn't look like me. And I had this one question, I was like, can artists be racist? And my ex-partner at the time, he was like, I think so. So I was like, that kind of drove that thought process further. So that's where that desire to look for people that look like me in Western art. And then there was like frustrations where I was hitting walls where there was very limited ways that we can be viewed. And then there were more books that I was collecting at the time. Representation of the Black figure in Western art was another catalog that I was reading where they talked about how in the newly colonialized areas of Trinidad and the islands, they had a hierarchy, like an artistic, technical way of representing this new mulatto population that was popping up. Other things about how to represent the dark-skinned Negro in red, many things. But this really stuck out for me was these diagrams of profiles, because again, it got me thinking about my time hanging out in the Holocaust Museum and seeing those diagrams of just measurements. And I was like, this looked really familiar, but then as I dived deeper, it was that's when I began to understand about phrenology, racial sciences, and how it was kind of a school of thought that also led to aestheticism, and that's where the Musée d'Orsay was able to bridge this connection between science and aesthetics and art between them. Because Petrus Camper was also he was a biologist, but also a anthropologist, but was also a great draftsman at the time too. So many of these studies that he published were also, he taught within art schools. And so, and you can also see like these conventions around, these studies developed conventions around how to represent other races that were popping up throughout the Western civilization through colonization. And it led to a lot of confusion. It led to, like, there's many more studies outside of art, but this is just the representation of how we have, like, just being very critical about neoclassicism, being very critical about why our Greco-Roman sculptures are stark white instead of them being usually painted, questioning where territories of other populations that have now been highlighted in neoclassicism, certain ethnicities have been erased out in those groups. And then also just thinking about more books I've been reading, Fearing the Black Body, Ain't I a Woman, other art, like Art as I Am by like other books by bell hooks, just questioning more about imagery and identity. And so right here, like going back into it, I'm questioning like all these studies, all these published sciences, these were once relevant and are still plays a shadow within the background, whether it comes to beauty standards and health and treating within African Americans within health. Even like dealing with eugenics when it comes to other nations, like dealing with Palestine and Israel, like everything. It all ties in together. And so this is just me just kind of blurting out this frustration. Like I've sat there and I've read a lot. Now what? How are we going to talk about this? How is this manifesting in me? How I'm like walking through this world? And so more and more, it began a conversation of my inner world of like how I'm viewing myself in my art, and also how are other people being viewed in art? How am I representing them in their art, in my work? And so right now it's been a lot more. After a while of this self-portrait, I did more self-portraits, questioning more about my identity, removing Eurocentric standards of beauty for my psyche, decolonization of my mind. And then now is kind of leading into a project where I am documenting people that I have interacted with day to day, even if it was just for a brief moment. I met them at work, I met them at an art event, met them because they were just traveling through DC and they just crossed my path. These are all beautiful portraits of very beautiful people from very diverse backgrounds, just sharing very short stories they have with me at that moment. And just thinking more about the purpose of portraiture in the first place. Like it was first meant to just document our existence, or just art itself is an act of human existence. And I think that is the biggest thing that I really am striving for in my career. And I guess it's like not just sharing my story, but also taking time out to share other stories. Like there are so many stories like of just people like doing portraiture and doing art. It's not just like it's not just that moment of treating that person like it's still life. It feels like I know it's cliche, but it's like I really feel like I'm capturing their spirit in some way. So.
Sandra Pérez-Ramos is a Puerto Rican artist who now, of course, has lived here for many years. I bring that up in the sense that when I first moved to this area when I was in the Navy in the 80s and all that, at one point I thought I was the only Cuban in all of Washington D.C. I've run across many since then. So anytime I find a couple of Boricuas, I always like to keep that in the back of my head. A poet once wrote that Cuba and Puerto Rico are the wings of a bird of the Caribbean. When you mentioned, by the way, before it slips my head, when you mentioned some of the issues you were talking about, Sandra probably remembers there's a very famous, I don't know if it's Cuban writer who wrote it or a Puerto Rican song that talks to a painter that paints Renaissance paintings. And one of the lines in the song in Spanish, translated from Spanish, it says, "A painter that you paint so well, why do you only paint white angels?" You probably know the song, right? Yeah. Exactly, Angeles Negros, Black Angels. And it's an old song, right? That's like from maybe the 20s.
And very powerful.
Yeah, it's a super powerful song.
30s, I think.
The 30s, yeah, it's a song. Right? Anyway, Sandra Pérez-Ramos.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. Thank you, Lenny, for this colossal project that you have taken on. I am very grateful to be part of this group. I came to Maryland in 2005, straight from the island. Thinking about something that you just said, there's nothing cliche about the spiritual. All my work deals directly and indirectly with the spiritual world and mythology. What other people call mythology, other people call religion. I think coming from the Caribbean, one of the coolest things and the most complicated things to understand, being in the US where definitions are very boxed and very defined. There's a lot of gatekeeping from each group. Coming from the Caribbean, what I find is that we live in all these gray spaces. I particularly have a DNA that stems from 19 regions, and I am happy to be a mod at this point. That's what I am. And the result of all of that is very palpable, I would say, in the way I was brought up. Puerto Rico, not just Puerto Rico, Caribbean in general, also some of Latin America, but Latin America, the Caribbean, Latin are very different. And part of my mission as an artist is to educate about that element. Let's open up our minds about that other side of Latin America. No, they have Mexico as a poster child. There's 33 plus countries. We're very different. Maybe we, listen to a few géneros of music that we could share, but it's completely different cultures. So I can start with the artwork that I have here. It's called Árbol Totem or Totem Tree, or sometimes called it a moon tree, inspired in the ceiba tree. I don't know if you've heard of the ceiba tree. It's a family of the baobab tree, another gigantic tree that when it's growing is full of thorns. So nobody, it takes 100 years for it to really become a voluptuous, strong a tree, very, very dramatic and very important for the indigenous people of the Caribbean area, because that was a tree that they saw as the connection
between the underworld, the ancestor, the spiritual world, and the rest and the deities. So it is right now facing the sculptures in the front and the garden in the front. And I think all my artwork is inspired and trying to teach people about polytheism. I think there's a huge taboo here with anything that's non-Christian. And so, that's what I focus on. I also work not just on drawing, like that one, that was a drawing, using acrylic pen and pigment inks, but I also work installations where I integrate objects because I like to play with Spanglish and the mix of languages that happens in our country and in our area. So sometimes objects and installation and fiber arts helps me bring additional topics to my work, to what I want to communicate. This one in particular is about the Ceiba, which is a mythology from the Taino culture. So Puerto Rico has, I'm also hooked on history and archaeology and anthropology, and I love everything you explained. But I think it's important to understand that at least in the Caribbean, there's a lot of magical thinking integrated into everyday life. And so that's part of my proposal, my intention is to show others there's nothing to fear. Other religions have rituals, have icons, have a weird aesthetic, like botanica stores. I don't know if you're familiar with botanicas. They're spiritual bazaars. And for example, in Puerto Rico, they're super popular to communicate. If you have a need, there's so many days you can choose from. Many different religions you can choose from. And you focus on those, and you focus on this on a connection to them. So yes, my aesthetic is very much about the mix of religions that happen not as assimilation, but as a form of resistance when groups were being erased and their philosophy, their idiosyncrasies were being completely tried to wipe out. What they did was try to survive. And so you had the indigenous groups struggling, the African enslaved brought over struggling. Part of Puerto Rico's heritage is strongly Yoruba, Igbo, Essam, and our language, the Spanish language in Puerto Rico is really not Spanish. It's a complete hybrid language that integrates, and we're made fun of by other Latin countries. They say, you're not talking Spanish, what are you speaking? Because we have like 3,200 Taino words, indigenous words mixed in, and like 860 something African from Yoruba, from Igbo, from Sam, words integrated into everyday speaking. So it's a very mixed culture, and that's how we live, with superstition, but we embrace it and we believe it, and with all those cultures alive in the middle of our everyday life. So it's not this, I just want to get away from the cliche of Latin. The idea you have of Latin you need to stop. You need to be open. You need to be open and listen, and embrace and research. I don't know. Don't know what else to add. I mean, I have a lot to add, but I don't know.
The Argentinian writer Jacobo Timmerman wrote a book called Los Latinos, and when it comes to the Caribbean, he wrote that Puerto Rico and Cuba use Spanish as a weapon. Sandra, when she had a DNA done, as I recall, we found out you had a significant percentage of Taino.
It was a beautiful discovery.
Right.
See the number.
Because we were told that they had been extinguished, right?
Exactly.
By the Spanish.
Which is a lie. It's a
Yes, it is a lie. When I did my DNA, I discovered, according to the National Geographic, which did my DNA, not one of those that says we're 10% Irish, 5% this, that at the time it was part of the Genome Project, which is mapping mankind. This is like 5-6 years ago, but according to their website, I still have the record. I had the highest non-human DNA ever recorded. I was slightly over 5% Neanderthal, and then something called Denisovan. I actually went downtown, they drew my blood to confirm it, because they do it initially from the swab, so yes. My father's parents came from Galicia in the mountains of northern Spain and France, and it made sense. The National Geo told me that mountain people don't move, and Homo sapiens and Neanderthal coexisted for like 50,000 years in those mountains, so they fooled around. So yeah, you're looking at 5% Neanderthal. Of course, my wife told the National Geographic, I couldn't have told you that. Okay, I have questions for the artists, but I also wanted to open it to the audience. We have plenty of time. If anybody has any questions for any of the artists or for them as a whole, anyone? Don't make me call on somebody. No chickens? Okay, all right. So, first one, Jenny, and 10, 15, 20 seconds, I feel like I'm on WTOP News now. When you were talking about your work, what popped in my head, I completely understand the origin of some of the interesting, sometimes macabre, always interesting stuff that you do. Any of it come from any sort of background stories or anything of that sort in your own upbringing?
Yeah, all of them. Every single one.
There you go.
That's my source material for sure. So there's a process of taking one of my stories, painting layers and layers and layers, and in such a way that I create a story that for me represents the feeling of my story, and then sharing it as this new narrative that's layered with fairy tale, with all sorts of other stories that I've come across in the movies. And then to connect the circle, oftentimes other people will see the piece and say, that reminds me of the time, and then tell me their story. And I've even had an experience where the story that person told me that fit back into a new painting.
Amber, Sandra was talking about something that's near and dear to my heart too, and she knows this, so we sometimes talk about it or it seems on Facebook. And that is this sort of, even in 2025, this stereotypical way that the world, mostly our world here in the United States, sees Latinos and Latinas as sort of, a Mexican. Let's put it that way, monolithic, right? When it isn't, 30% of Argentinians are German ancestry and 60% are of Italian ancestry. The joke was that Argentinians used to, talking about eugenics, in the late 1800s, they used to go to Europe to look for immigrants, and they would want to bring Nordic immigrants, and they got a lot of them, right? But most of the people of Argentinian ancestry are Italian ancestry. So the joke in Latin America is that they advertise for Germans and get Italians. it is kind of like that, a running theme. In fact, when in the 1960s, the island of Manx, in a small island of Great Britain, they have a language called Manx, and they were down to one native speaker because the English had forbidden them from teaching their own language, and they got rid of that. They had to go. They went to Argentina to find native speakers from the Manx people that had moved there. So I'm talking about the diversity. So my question to get back, I'm meandering, but I kind of wanted to step out. I know that your work, because I've done your work for a long time, sort of a lot of times draws from your background as a Black Latina in that sense, and that shows the threats of colonialism and things of that sort. Is that do you do that both to express that background, but also to try to release some of the frustration that comes from, people like, oh, you're Latina, but you're black, kind of stuff, right?
Yes, the answer is yes. And I have, I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, had to deal with those contradictions and just looking for a nice word for lack of education or just even openness throughout my life. And I remember being teased as a young girl at age 5 about my speaking Spanish with my mom when she would pick me up or drop me off to school. So much so that I eventually went home at age 5 and basically said to my mom I didn't want to speak Spanish anymore. Mm. And so, the emotional or the sound response that I got from this side of the room makes me want to just iterate that you never know what your words can have and the impact that your words can have, especially on a child. And so, yeah, I have been battling that because even that definitely impacted my continued acquisition of my first language. But it also impacted my relationship with other members of my family. It impacted other relationships in terms of people that I was raised along with. And I've definitely, like in recent years, like since 2017, 2019, I've had, because my child is now a grown adult, and I could look at some broader things about life and engage them more openly and directly in my artwork, I started to focus on my own heritage. And so that led me to PR, to actually go to PR and live for a period of time and create a body of work called Place of Breath and Birth, where I was looking at literally my Afro-Puerto Rican heritage and looking at the dynamics of the beauty of it, and the beauty of Puerto Rico, but also the contradictions, because we all are, we all have contradictions that are like literally embedded in us. But that was definitely, and that led me to the larger work that I showed here in 2021, Successions Traversing U.S. Colonialism, which I was looking at the overall U.S. involvement and treatment of U.S. citizens that live in the territories. So I would say that in the last 5-6 years, that is literally what I've been creating, for the most part, creating work about this connection to race, ethnicity, and our social and political dynamics that has caused layers of trauma throughout generations of people of color. And I say people of color because I don't only talk about my own heritage. The quilts, you have American Samoa, you have Northern Mariana Islands, you have Guam, you have Puerto Rico, and you have U.S. Virgin Islands. And then I also did a quilt about my own energy, and I did a quilt about the District of Columbia. So, yes, to answer your question.
There's a very, very well-known Afro-Cuban artist called Maria Magdalena Campos Pons, who holds the distinct honor, in my opinion, of being the youngest artist ever to have a solo show at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And when she was very, very young, came to the United States in her 20s, she was at the Institute of Fine Arts in Boston, and Carol Walker was giving a talk, the famous African-American artist. And at one point, Magda raised her hand and in her very, very bad English at the time asked the question. And Carol Walker looked at her and said, "What are you?" So that kind of brings it all in kind of in a full circle, I think, of what we're talking about. And, she's like a middle-aged older lady now, and she still remembers that because she brings it up all the time because it made an impact on her. So, I am always astounded by people who are able to work on a significant scale. So you know the next question that I'm going to ask is of you. How is, because I admire artwork that has not just artistic presence, but also like an ability to really pick up space in the mind and in the eyes of people that are walking through a museum. It's not easy to pull on it. But does that introduce, and this kind of almost like a more technical question, does that introduce additional sort of mental stress and loads in preparation of the work, the transportation, all of that stuff, right? Because that's usually the stuff that stops a lot of young artists from moving in that direction.
Well, for many, many years, I had a third floor studio with a very tight stairwell. So, and before that, I was in a basement. And it wasn't until my husband and I moved, like 2009. And when we moved, one of my criteria, well, one of the things I really, really wanted to get off a busy road. The other one was to be able to have access to a ground floor entrance. Now, try to find that in the district is really hard. So I was looking for a one-car garage attached to the house or not attached to the house. And I got very lucky after many, many years of looking for a studio. I no longer was hauling stuff up and down to the third floor. A nice little Sprint van can come right out to my studio. I slide the door open and get it out. But I didn't know that I was going to have art that was that big. What happened was it actually got me going on this whole thing of documenting plants, which never really would have popped into my head. But one day I was out on a walk in Rockery Park that I really loved. I promise I'll make it short.
No.
And I accidentally stepped on a fern because I had to go around the trail because a large tree had crossed the trail or fell across the trail. And when I went around the tree and sort of, kind of hopped over it or whatever, my boots completely crushed a fern. And I was just like, not supposed to damage the forest, right? Okay, so not that was the forest, but I thought, I looked at it and my nose was down on the ground and I was looking up to this fern and I thought, oh my God, I'm always walking on the trail, looking at the trees and never looking at the ground. And it just really, was, I don't know, one of those simple moments that had a profound effect on me. And it happened to be during my year of fun, which I sort of had given myself a sabbatical of sort of having deadlines for my art. Because after I moved, everything kind of switched up and I needed a break to figure out where I was going to go next. So I decided to go back in my studio and make the fern. And it was this big, because that's about the size the fern was. And I showed it to a bunch of friends. And the response I got was really like, oh, isn't that sweet? And I thought, oh, this is not communicating what I intended to do. So I went to my studio, I took out a long rope, and all sorts of, odd things in my studio, one of which is a large rope. I put it on the floor, and I made a spiral. And I thought, well, maybe it needs to be that big. It, was bigger than the canvas I was putting it on. I gave up on the canvas because it was a 3x4 and that wasn't making the impact. So I made it bigger. And then I measured it several times. It was 14 feet. I was like, oh, my year of fun just got eaten up. Do I really want to do this? And I thought, well, art takes courage. I've got time. I don't want to waste my year of fun, but I need to be courageous and see. So, and also cutting with the scissors is really laborious and can really hurt your hands in a really bad way. So I sought out scissors for a few months, found a good pair, and set to work. It took me over a month to cut the fern out. And then I just sort of worked my way, baby steps from there. But it made the impact. And that's what I was looking for. When I finished the piece, framed it, this all took at least a year or more. I framed it and I asked a friend to come see it. And when she walked through the door, she gasped. And I thought, oh, I wasn't expecting that. But it communicated the beauty and the frailty that I wanted to reach. I wanted people to feel something when they looked at the work.
And I would submit as evidence. I've given lots of tours to different groups here. Nearly everyone, thinks that's the real leaf that you framed. So it's from Royal, fools the eye. And nearly everyone thinks that Olivia next to it is a photograph. It's like the two common things. Akemi, you've gone almost kind of in my mind the opposite way. When I first met you, you had that giant egg, remember? Yeah. And now you've come to work on very delicate, I would say, intimate objects a lot of times, which I think has its own power because I think in artwork, what a small piece does is that because of the intimacy of the size, it demands that the viewer gets close to it, right, and looks at it, I think, a little bit closer. That a gorgeous piece by Rini Stahl behind you is perfect evidence of that. So what drove you to start doing it that way, to go in that other direction from the Akemi? When I first met her, what was it, Martin? What was the name of the gallery? Yes. Martin Irvine had one of the, if not the best, one of the best galleries here in the region. And Akemi had a show there that I went to see. And one of the pieces, probably the most striking piece, was this enormous fried egg that was a woman.
It's made of fabric. Egg yolk part is the ceramics that actually you can sit on and meditate. And on all the white egg white part is very cushiony. Underneath is a stuff used for furniture, like
Right.
yeah. So people can gather and then lay down, meditate. So that piece was called "Your Sunny Side Should Be Up" chair. So when I heard that the egg, fried egg is called "sunny side up" in English, I was really shocked because in Japanese, fried egg is called medamayaki, which means fried eyeball. So it doesn't have any like a magical image, but sunny side up is really like, Japan. In Japan, sun is a god kind of, very important meaning. Sun is for everything, beginning of everything. So when I heard sunny side up, that fried egg means something that, so magical and so important that people need to appreciate, get together and, meditate. And so that's why I made that piece. Had to be big, like your piece. Like it's a 13 by 13 or that feet. It's huge. But anyway, so that was a literal the piece. But because of my cultural background, the difference between the English and Japanese meaning, that piece came from that difference. But now I'm working on more, precious, everyday, mundane joy and then happiness. And I'm so far from my own country, and I don't get to eat tasty Japanese food every day unless I cook by myself. So my imagination is just to appreciate something visually. I want to eat it, but cannot eat it. But it lasts forever almost. And that's how I started to, yeah.
Last question, Selena. So, I'm going to probably give you the hardest question. Because I think your work has received, through the reviews and stuff, a lot of attention. And because you're so very young and so very talented, give us a look into the future. Where do you see yourself in your work, like in 10, 15 years from now?
So I would say, right now I know in the near future I have my second solo show coming up in January, which is really exciting, which again is discussing the works of people that I've interacted with. Faces of America is the title of the project. So really looking forward to getting together for that. But I really want to have my work in larger spaces. I really want to be an art educator in a way of like being able to teach youth art in a way that I was taught. Because like I really feel like, you know, we're seeing like I'm seeing so many young artists in DC popping up these days that are self-taught, that are coming out of working in their basements, working in murals. Like, so there's like so much new art that I really want to like cultivate, and also just like because like art history is really how I fell in love with art too. And I'm like, I really want to put that in for students one day. So that's like what I really want to do. But I really want to make art about people and continuing like hopefully like them being museums and larger gallery spaces and seeing them becoming international and awesome, and hopefully taking myself internationally to find more new stories. Like working with the Indie Gallery and the duo that correlates with that. This is 2 days in the room, I think. Like just the scholarly approach of understanding Africa and the artistic impact of Africa. Like I'm just reading more about that. Like I want to see like what beautiful people are coming from there now. What beautiful art is coming from. Art has been created in the cultural impacts. Like I don't know. I really see art as a means of tools of research and a means of documentation. And I don't know. I really just want to take it in that direction. And yeah, just really explore the world in that way.
We've run out of time, but not by much, so I think we did a pretty good job. One last chance. Anybody have any questions before I? Yes. I'll bring the mic.
This is a question for Sophia about sassafras.
Yes.
Which is, when I look at a piece of nature made that large, I look at it like a portrait of a person. I mean, it's a character. And I wonder if you've had any of those kinds of intentions in your creation, and also if it's one leaf or if it's lots of leaves combining, and then you have one source reference. Because it's so realistic. I'm in school too. I want to.
Where did I have a sassafras tree that big?
Let's see. First question. I'm sorry, I got confused.
Do you
Yes,
consider them
I do consider them portraits. I do, and that's like a face of somebody. You see the beauty and the flaws. And then the second part was, is it a combination? Well, yes and no. So I find I look at many leaves, obviously, right? And then I scan the leaf, and then I have that leaf that scan printed to scale of what I'm going to be creating. Because that really helps me making the actual sculptural part of the leaf. It's all white background that I'm starting with, sewing it all together in its various parts. That doesn't have too many parts, but a fern has a lot. And then before I begin to paint the leaf, I usually go to the herbarium. I can look at what they have online, but I really like to go to the herbarium downtown, which is a section of the Natural History Museum. I've gotten to know the people there very well, so I call them up, say, hey, when can I come visit? And then I look through their collection to see, how it varies from other leaves, because it's just like people. I mean, there are lots of us, and as we've been discussing, all variations, and so I just want to see, where it is, and sometimes, the leaf might have a really ugly looking spot in a place that really doesn't really make a balanced composition. So I might fudge a little bit there. And actually talked to the staff illustrator at the Smithsonian, who's a dear friend of mine, and she has told me that is okay. So I feel like thank you for your question.
Basically, this question is actually for Selena. I recall you mentioning your interest in visiting the Holocaust Museum, and given that how much of your art focuses on diagramming the human body, I'm really curious, how do you approach capturing someone's essence while making sure you set aside your own personal feelings or preconceptions?
Ooh, that's tough. I don't know. Maybe because I'm not there when the person is there, when they're sitting with me, or when I'm wishing to document them at that moment. I think the only point of me being there is to be that gap to bridge them having a story and me, or them being present to just want to be captured and me capturing it. And I think it's really maybe it's, I would say, setting aside preconceived, I think is it dealing more when it comes to stylistic choices or when it comes to more ideas and opinions? Is that part of the question?
That's
all of it. Okay, stylistic. Well, I try to stay as natural as possible. I think I really trained my eye and my hands to really just keep it really as close to the sitter as possible. I think that's just technical accuracy. But I think keeping myself aside of it, I think really where it is, is I let the sitters come naturally to me. I think the story isn't ready to be told, or I'm not the vessel to give it until that moment is given to me. And I would say this is a really cool story. Christiana Bennett, literally she just popped up to me in a museum and just started yapping. Creole cowgirl from Louisiana, rich Afro-Indigenous history. So it's I kind of just it's like a river, it just has to flow to me. And I just take it as a moment to make it's my responsibility to have this work here. I have this person's likeness, I have this person's story. I'm just going to do what due diligence is and give the best shot I can. So, yeah.
Yes.
Hey there, it's so great to have a bunch of women artists here. I think people don't realize that showing your art, there's this level of vulnerability that, you talk about belief, right? And I just applaud y'all for being so brave in showing the work. Additionally, I am the president of Women Photojournalists of Washington. And I'd like to invite anyone in here today. I think I saw some other photojournalists here. We are having an opening tomorrow, and I think a lot of you might know Lost Origins, which is a fantastic. Jason is an amazing owner of a gallery. He has individual shows all of the time, but he is hosting Women Photojournalists, our art opening tomorrow, which is photographs only in the outside gallery. That's from 2 to 3:45, and then from 4 to 6, we're having a reception at his gallery, and everyone is welcome. I might get in trouble for this, but if I can get 10% of you there, please come and check out our art. If you can't make it, please at some point come and see some of the photographers that we have. Thank you.
Anybody else? If I could have, I know there's a few artists in the audience, if I could have the artists that are in this exhibition or any of the others. Oh, wait, you have a question?
No.
Oh.
I wanted hands.
No, stand up. If you're one of the artists in any of the shows, please stand up. And if I could ask, thank you to our panel, and if I could have another round of applause for us. All right, thank you for coming. Feel free to circulate, ask them any questions. Oh, you're quite welcome.